Sometimes the biggest mistake a person can make is believing a badge gives them the right to decide who deserves respect. At exactly 8:23 on a bright Tuesday morning, the parking lot outside a federal office complex in downtown Atlanta looked no different than it had 100 mornings before. Office workers hurried toward glass doors with steaming coffee cups, delivery trucks unloaded supplies, and the distant sound of traffic blended into the steady rhythm of another ordinary workday. Nobody standing there could have imagined that the next 7 minutes would quietly change the lives of everyone who witnessed them. Officer Ethan Walker adjusted the radio clip to his shoulder before stepping out of his patrol vehicle with the calm confidence that came from more than 15 years wearing a police uniform. Every movement suggested certainty. Every step reflected someone who believed experience alone guaranteed good judgment. Across the parking lot, a black woman in a tailored navy business suit walked toward the building carrying a slim leather portfolio. Her name was Maya Brooks. Her pace was unhurried, her posture relaxed, and her expression remarkably composed despite noticing the patrol car long before the officer called out to her. "Could I speak with you for a moment?" Ethan asked in a firm but controlled voice. Several nearby pedestrians slowed their pace without stopping completely. Maya turned naturally, offering a polite nod that revealed neither surprise nor concern. "Of course, officer," she answered. There was no hesitation in her voice. No irritation. No attempt to leave. She simply waited. Ethan studied her carefully. Something about her calmness unsettled him more than nervousness would have. Most people immediately explained themselves, reached for identification, or asked what was wrong. Maya did none of those things. She simply stood beneath the morning sunlight, maintaining steady eye contact with a quiet confidence that seemed almost impossible to read. "May I ask what brings you here today?" Ethan continued. "Business," Maya replied evenly. It was a truthful answer, although it revealed almost nothing. Ethan glanced toward the secured entrance of the federal building before looking back at her. "Do you have identification with you?" Maya nodded once. "Yes." "Would you mind showing it?" She paused for only a second before speaking again. "May I ask why?" It was not an argument. It was not disrespectful. It was a calm question delivered with remarkable professionalism. Yet something inside Ethan interpreted that composure as resistance. Around them, a few more people quietly slowed down. 2 construction workers across the street leaned against a temporary barrier while pretending to check their phones. A receptionist arriving for work stopped near the entrance, sensing that something unusual was unfolding. None of them knew that a silent clock had already begun counting down. 7 minutes. That was all the time separating certainty from disbelief. Maya knew exactly what time it was because the mission she had been working on for months depended on precision. She also knew something nobody else standing in that parking lot could possibly understand. Sometimes the safest place to protect the truth was behind complete silence. Maya slowly reached into the inside pocket of her suit jacket with deliberate, unhurried movements, never breaking eye contact with Officer Ethan Walker. She produced a leather wallet containing identification and held it in front of her without extending it toward him. Ethan took one step closer and examined it carefully. The identification looked authentic, but before he could study every detail, Maya calmly closed the wallet again. "Is there a specific reason you requested identification today, officer?" she asked with the same measured tone. Ethan frowned slightly. "I am asking the questions." His voice remained controlled, but there was now a sharper edge beneath the professionalism. Maya acknowledged his response with a respectful nod. "Understood." She offered nothing more. The silence lingered longer than Ethan expected. He had handled thousands of routine encounters during his career, and almost all of them followed familiar patterns. People explained themselves. They apologized even when unnecessary. They volunteered information. Maya did none of those things. She simply stood with perfect composure, neither confrontational nor intimidated. Around them, more people began noticing that the conversation was lasting longer than a normal identification check. A courier pushing a delivery cart slowed his pace. Two office employees standing near the entrance quietly exchanged uncertain glances before pretending to continue their conversation. The atmosphere remained calm, yet curiosity spread through the parking lot like ripples across still water. Ethan glanced briefly toward his patrol vehicle, then back at Maya. "You seem unusually calm." Maya answered with a faint, almost imperceptible smile. Remaining calm usually helps everyone. It was a simple statement, but Ethan interpreted it differently. To him, her confidence seemed unusual, almost rehearsed. He believed experience had taught him to recognize when someone was withholding information. The longer the conversation continued, the more convinced he became that he was uncovering something important. What he did not realize was that Maya had spent years learning how to remain composed during difficult conversations. Her breathing never changed. Her posture remained relaxed. Even the way she held her portfolio reflected discipline developed through countless hours of professional training. She silently observed every detail around her. The location of nearby security cameras. The reflections in the building windows. The expressions on the faces of the growing number of witnesses. Every observation quietly settled into her memory without changing her calm expression. Ethan requested that she remain where she was while he verified her information. Maya answered politely. "I will cooperate within the law." Once again, the response contained neither defiance nor submission. It simply acknowledged the moment exactly as it existed. Ethan returned to his patrol vehicle and spoke briefly into his radio. His words were calm, but his confidence continued to grow. He believed each passing minute confirmed his instincts. As he waited for a response, he looked back toward Maya. She had not moved an inch. She stood beneath the bright Georgia sunlight exactly where he had left her, hands resting naturally around her portfolio, watching the ordinary morning continue around them as though she had nowhere else she needed to be. Few people noticed the black sport utility vehicle parked nearly half a block away. Its engine remained off. Its windows reflected the morning light. Inside, several quiet observers watched the parking lot with remarkable patience. None of them made a single move. They were waiting for one specific moment, and according to the synchronized clock inside the vehicle, that moment was now less than 5 minutes away. Officer Ethan Walker stepped away from his patrol vehicle after receiving a brief response through his radio, and although nothing he heard confirmed his growing suspicions, it also did nothing to weaken them. Experience had taught him to trust his instincts, and at that moment his instincts were telling him that Maya Brooks was deliberately withholding something important. He returned with measured confidence, stopping several feet in front of her once again. "I was not able to verify everything as quickly as I expected," he said. "Until I can, I need you to remain here." Maya acknowledged him with another calm nod. "I understand your request." There was still no sign of frustration in her voice. She did not glance at her watch. She did not ask how long the process would take. She simply remained where she stood, allowing the morning air to move gently through the nearby trees while sunlight reflected across the polished windows of the federal building behind her. That quiet patience began affecting the people watching more than any dramatic argument ever could. A maintenance worker pushing a cart stopped just long enough to observe before continuing toward another entrance. A young attorney carrying a stack of legal files slowed her pace, quietly studying both faces before entering the building. Even a security officer standing near the main doors seemed uncertain whether this was simply another routine interaction or the beginning of something much more significant. Ethan folded his arms for a moment while continuing to observe Maya. Every answer she had given was respectful. Every movement had been deliberate. Yet the absence of anxiety continued to bother him. Most people displayed some visible emotion during an unexpected encounter with law enforcement. Maya displayed discipline instead. Her breathing remained steady. Her shoulders stayed relaxed. Her eyes wandered only occasionally, calmly taking in the surroundings without appearing distracted. She looked less like someone caught off guard and more like someone patiently waiting for a scheduled appointment. "You seem unusually prepared for this," Ethan finally remarked. Maya answered with complete honesty. "Preparation is part of my profession." The statement caught Ethan's attention immediately. "What profession is that?" he asked. Maya looked at him for a brief second before responding. "Today I cannot discuss my work." Once again her answer was neither misleading nor argumentative. It simply ended where professional responsibility required it to end. Ethan interpreted the response differently. In his mind, every unanswered question strengthened his belief that additional scrutiny was justified. Nearby conversations began fading as more people quietly followed the exchange from a respectful distance. Nobody interrupted. Nobody interfered. They simply watched two strangers standing beneath the bright Georgia sky while an invisible tension continued growing between certainty and silence. Less than 4 minutes had passed since Ethan first approached Maya, but to the small crowd gathering around the parking lot, time seemed noticeably slower. Maya remained fully aware of each passing second. Without looking toward the far end of the street, she knew exactly where the dark sport utility vehicle remained parked. She also knew the people inside were following an established operational timeline with the same discipline she had practiced throughout her own career. Nothing had gone wrong. In fact, everything unfolding around her was revealing more than words alone ever could. Ethan requested another update through his radio, speaking clearly while keeping his attention fixed on Maya. As he waited for the reply, a faint reflection moved across the windshield of the distant black vehicle. Its engine quietly started, almost unnoticed beneath the ordinary sounds of downtown traffic. Slowly, without attracting attention, it eased away from the curb and began rolling toward the federal building, leaving less than 3 minutes before the carefully planned countdown reached its final moment. 3 minutes remained, although nobody in the parking lot realized they were watching the final moments before an ordinary morning would become unforgettable. Officer Ethan Walker stood with growing confidence, convinced that patience would eventually uncover whatever Maya Brooks was refusing to explain. To him, every careful answer sounded incomplete. To Maya, every passing second confirmed that the operation was unfolding exactly as planned. She had accepted assignments that demanded long hours of surveillance, careful observation, and absolute emotional discipline. Compared with those experiences, standing quietly beneath the Georgia sun while answering respectful questions required very little effort. What Ethan could not see was that this morning had begun long before he arrived. Several hours earlier, Maya had entered a secure conference room inside a nearby federal facility where a small investigative team reviewed photographs, official reports, communication logs, and carefully organized evidence collected over many months. Nobody raised their voice during that meeting. Nobody made dramatic speeches. The atmosphere reflected the quiet professionalism of experienced investigators preparing for another carefully coordinated assignment. Before leaving, the supervising agent looked directly at Maya and reminded everyone of one instruction above all others. No matter what happens outside, let the process reveal the truth. Maya simply nodded. She understood exactly what that meant. An investigation built upon facts could never depend on emotion. Every conversation mattered. Every decision mattered. Every recorded statement mattered. As she left the conference room carrying nothing more than a slim leather portfolio, she already knew where she would be standing at approximately 8:23 that morning. She also knew that several support teams would remain nearby without drawing attention to themselves unless circumstances required their presence. Back in the present, Ethan studied Maya once again. The longer he watched her, the more convinced he became that she had carefully rehearsed every answer. He had no way of knowing that her calmness came not from preparation for this encounter, but from years of professional training that demanded emotional control under public scrutiny. Nearby, the receptionist who had entered the building minutes earlier quietly returned to the front entrance carrying paperwork. She paused again after noticing that the conversation still had not ended. Two federal employees walking toward the parking garage exchanged puzzled glances before continuing toward their offices. Even the breeze seemed unusually gentle as leaves drifted across the pavement between the patrol vehicle and the federal building. Life continued exactly as it always had, yet an invisible shift was beginning to settle over everyone present. Ethan received another brief message through his radio. The update contained no immediate answers, but he interpreted the delay as another reason to continue pressing forward. "I still have a few questions," he said. Maya answered with the same steady voice that had never once risen above a normal conversation. "I will answer every question I am permitted to answer." Those words lingered in the quiet morning air. They sounded simple enough, yet they carried a meaning that nobody around them fully understood. Almost at the same moment, the black sport utility vehicle that had quietly left its parking place completed its slow approach to the federal complex. It was joined by a second identical vehicle turning smoothly onto the same entrance road. Neither vehicle used emergency equipment. Neither attracted unnecessary attention. They simply moved with calm precision toward their destination. Maya never turned her head. She did not need to. She recognized the timing perfectly. The countdown that had begun with a routine greeting in a parking lot was now entering its final minutes, and the truth was no longer approaching. It had already arrived. The first black sport utility vehicle rolled quietly to the curb in front of the federal building, followed only seconds later by the second. Neither driver rushed. Neither vehicle used flashing lights or sirens. Their arrival looked almost ordinary, yet something about their timing immediately changed the atmosphere in the parking lot. Conversations faded. Several pedestrians instinctively stepped aside. Even Officer Ethan Walker turned his attention toward the vehicles, believing for a brief moment that additional personnel had arrived to assist with what he still considered a routine encounter. Maya Brooks remained exactly where she had been standing since the conversation began. Her expression did not change. She neither smiled nor appeared relieved. She simply watched the scene unfold with the same calm patience she had maintained from the very beginning. The front passenger door of the first vehicle opened, and a man in a dark business suit stepped onto the pavement carrying a slim leather portfolio identical to Maya's. Two more professionally dressed men and a woman exited the second vehicle, each wearing discreet communication earpieces and displaying the quiet confidence of experienced federal professionals. None of them hurried toward Maya. Instead, they approached at a measured pace that reflected discipline rather than urgency. Ethan took one step forward and raised his hand politely. "Good morning," he said. "I am conducting an investigation here." The lead man acknowledged him with a courteous nod. "Good morning, officer." His voice was calm, respectful, and remarkably composed. "Thank you for maintaining the scene." Ethan interpreted those words as confirmation that the newcomers intended to support his actions. His confidence visibly returned. He gestured toward Maya without hostility but with unmistakable certainty. "I still need to determine exactly who she is and why she is here." The lead official looked briefly toward Maya before returning his attention to Ethan. Maya offered only the slightest nod, as though confirming that everything was proceeding according to schedule. The official understood immediately. No additional explanation was necessary. Around them, more people had quietly gathered near the building entrance. Employees paused before entering the lobby. Delivery drivers remained beside their trucks. The security officer near the front doors observed every movement with growing curiosity. Nobody spoke loudly. Nobody interrupted. The silence itself seemed to draw everyone closer. The lead official opened his portfolio with deliberate care and removed a sealed identification wallet. He did not present it immediately. Instead, he looked directly at Ethan and asked politely, "Officer, approximately how long has your interaction with this individual lasted?" Ethan considered the question for a moment. "Around 7 minutes," he answered. The official glanced at his wristwatch before allowing a faint professional smile to appear. "Thank you," he replied. "That matches our timeline exactly." Ethan blinked, momentarily uncertain what the comment meant. For the first time since the encounter began, he realized the newcomers were not asking questions because they lacked information. They were confirming information they already possessed. Maya remained completely silent. The morning breeze carried loose leaves across the parking lot while sunlight reflected from the glass walls behind them. The lead official finally opened the identification wallet and held it where Ethan could read it clearly without needing to step closer. Across the top, beneath the official seal of the United States Department of Justice, appeared the unmistakable words Federal Bureau of Investigation. Below them was Maya Brooks's photograph beside her title, identifying her as a special agent assigned to an active federal operation. In that single quiet moment, every assumption that had shaped the previous 7 minutes dissolved without anyone raising their voice. Officer Ethan Walker read the identification twice before lowering his eyes for a brief moment, as though his mind needed additional time to accept what was plainly written in front of him. The parking lot remained remarkably quiet. Nobody laughed. Nobody whispered. The silence carried far more weight than any dramatic reaction ever could. The lead federal official carefully returned the identification wallet to its protective case before speaking in the same calm, professional tone that had defined every word since arriving. Special Agent Maya Brooks has been assigned to an active Federal Bureau of Investigation operation that has been coordinated through the appropriate federal channels. Thank you for maintaining a professional scene while we conclude this matter. Ethan looked from the official to Maya and then back again. His confident posture softened almost imperceptibly. She never identified herself, he said, attempting to understand the situation rather than challenge it. Maya answered before anyone else could respond. I answered every question I was permitted to answer. Her voice remained steady, respectful, and completely free of triumph. She was not interested in embarrassing anyone. She was interested only in protecting the integrity of the assignment she had sworn to complete. The lead official nodded in agreement. Certain federal operations require limited disclosure until designated checkpoints are reached. 7 minutes ago was not that checkpoint. This moment is. Ethan slowly released a quiet breath as the meaning of those words settled in. During the entire encounter, Maya had never provided false information. She had never argued. She had never attempted to leave. She had never raised her voice. Every response had been truthful within the limits of her professional responsibilities. The realization arrived gradually, making the previous conversation replay inside his mind with entirely different meaning. Around them, several witnesses exchanged thoughtful glances. The receptionist standing near the entrance lowered the paperwork she had been holding. The maintenance worker quietly resumed pushing his cart after watching history unfold without ever expecting to become part of it. 2 attorneys walking toward the building paused just long enough to appreciate the professionalism with which the situation was now being resolved before continuing toward the courthouse entrance. The atmosphere had completely changed. Only minutes earlier, uncertainty had filled the parking lot. Now clarity had quietly replaced it. One of the federal agents approached Maya and handed her a secure folder that had remained sealed throughout the operation. She accepted it with a simple nod. No celebration followed. No dramatic speeches interrupted the morning. Professionalism remained the language everyone chose to speak. Ethan finally looked directly at Maya. If I misunderstood the situation, I appreciate your cooperation throughout the process. Maya met his eyes with the same calm expression she had carried from the first moment they spoke. Professional encounters become stronger when everyone has the opportunity to learn from them. Her answer contained neither accusation nor praise. It simply acknowledged that every difficult moment could become a lesson when approached with honesty. The lead official thanked Ethan for his cooperation, then informed him that all communication logs, body camera recordings, dispatch records, and other routine documentation connected to the encounter would be preserved according to standard procedure because they formed part of the broader federal timeline. Ethan acknowledged the information with a quiet nod. As the federal team prepared to continue their assignment, the bright Atlanta morning looked exactly as it had 7 minutes earlier. The buildings had not changed. The streets remained busy. The sunlight still reflected from the glass windows. Yet everyone who had witnessed those 7 minutes understood something they had not known before. Respect could never be determined by appearance, and the quietest person in the room might be carrying responsibilities far greater than anyone could imagine. The federal vehicles remained parked quietly along the curb as the morning slowly returned to its familiar rhythm, but for those who had witnessed the encounter, nothing felt quite as ordinary anymore. Officer Ethan Walker watched as Special Agent Maya Brooks exchanged a few brief words with the lead federal official before accepting the secure folder and reviewing its contents with practiced efficiency. Every movement reflected years of discipline rather than celebration. There was no victory in her expression because, in her profession, successful operations were measured by facts preserved instead of emotions displayed. The lead official then addressed the small federal team gathered beside the vehicles. Document the timeline exactly as observed. Preserve all routine records. Maintain standard chain of custody. The instructions were delivered calmly because no extraordinary measures were necessary. This was simply how professional investigations were conducted. Ethan listened carefully, realizing that the 7-minute encounter had already become part of a much larger record. The dispatch audio from his patrol vehicle, the body camera recording attached to his uniform, the nearby security cameras mounted on the federal building, and even the timestamps generated through ordinary communications would now exist as one complete sequence that could be reviewed from beginning to end without interruption. Maya had understood that from the very first second. That realization settled heavily in Ethan's mind. He quietly replayed the conversation as he remembered it. Every question he had asked. Every answer Maya had given. Every pause between sentences. What had once sounded incomplete now sounded remarkably precise. She had never claimed to be someone she was not. She had never hidden behind false statements. She had simply protected information that she was legally obligated to protect until the proper moment arrived. Nearby, the receptionist who had witnessed nearly the entire exchange walked through the front doors carrying her paperwork, but before disappearing inside, she glanced back one final time. She would probably tell coworkers about the unusual morning, not because of dramatic confrontation, but because she had watched professionalism overcome assumptions without anyone raising a voice. The maintenance worker resumed cleaning the walkway while quietly shaking his head, still amazed that such an ordinary conversation had unfolded into something so unexpected. 2 attorneys entered the building discussing how quickly perception could change when complete information finally became available. None of them knew the details of Maya's assignment, nor would they ever need to. The lesson they witnessed required no classified explanation. Ethan approached the lead federal official once more with measured respect. "Will there be additional questions for me?" he asked. The official answered honestly. "Standard documentation will be reviewed as part of the existing investigative process. If any follow-up becomes necessary, the appropriate office will contact your department through established procedures." There was no accusation in the response. There was no threat. Only the calm certainty that institutions function best when facts spoke for themselves. Maya closed the secure folder and looked briefly across the parking lot before stepping toward the waiting vehicle. As she passed Ethan, she paused for only a moment. "Thank you for remaining professional after learning the full situation," she said sincerely. Ethan nodded quietly. "I appreciate the opportunity to understand it." Their exchange lasted only seconds, yet everyone close enough to hear it recognized something important. Respect was not proven by always being right. Sometimes it was proven by accepting new facts with honesty once they became known. As the federal team prepared to leave, the cameras that had silently recorded every minute remained exactly where they had always been, fixed high above the entrance, patiently capturing events without opinion, reminding everyone that truth often speaks most clearly when the entire story is finally seen. The federal sport utility vehicles departed as quietly as they had arrived, disappearing into the steady flow of downtown Atlanta traffic without attracting unnecessary attention. Within moments, the parking lot began returning to its ordinary rhythm. Employees resumed walking toward the entrance with coffee in hand, delivery drivers continued unloading packages, and conversations gradually shifted back to meetings, schedules, and deadlines. Yet beneath that familiar routine, something had changed for everyone who had witnessed the encounter. Officer Ethan Walker remained beside his patrol vehicle for another few moments before contacting his supervisor through official channels. His report contained no excuses and no dramatic language. Instead, he carefully documented the sequence of events exactly as they had occurred, including the time of the initial contact, the questions he had asked, the responses he had received, and the moment federal personnel confirmed Special Agent Maya Brooks's identity. Accuracy mattered now more than personal opinion. Across the city, inside a secure federal office, members of Maya's investigative team began organizing the routine documentation collected throughout the morning. Timestamps from communications were matched with dispatch records. Building security footage was catalogued alongside public surveillance recordings that had lawfully captured portions of the encounter. Body camera video would eventually become another objective piece of the overall timeline. None of the material existed to embarrass anyone. Its purpose was exactly what it had always been designed to accomplish, preserving facts exactly as they happened. Maya quietly reviewed the operational notes inside the secure folder before signing several standard documents confirming that the scheduled checkpoint had been completed successfully. One of her colleagues looked up from a computer screen and smiled respectfully. "Everything matches the projected timeline." Maya returned the smile with quiet satisfaction. That is what preparation is supposed to accomplish. There was no celebration inside the office. Successful professionals rarely celebrated routine assignments. They simply completed one responsibility before preparing for the next. Back at the police department, Ethan's supervisor requested a complete review of the morning encounter, not because anyone had reached conclusions, but because transparency strengthened public trust. Ethan understood that process immediately. Professional accountability was not a punishment. It was part of wearing a uniform responsibly. He cooperated fully, providing every record requested without hesitation. As the day continued, several witnesses reflected privately on what they had seen. The receptionist realized how easily appearances could create assumptions before facts became available. The maintenance worker remembered Maya's calm expression and wondered how many difficult situations true professionals quietly navigated every day without seeking recognition. The young attorneys who had paused near the entrance discussed the importance of patience inside every legal process, recognizing that incomplete information often produced incomplete judgments. None of them knew the details of the federal investigation, and none of them needed to know. The lesson had never depended on classified information. It depended on understanding that respect should never be delayed until someone's credentials become visible. Late that afternoon, Maya stood for a brief moment beside the large office window overlooking the Atlanta skyline. The city stretched for miles beneath the warm light of the setting sun, filled with thousands of ordinary conversations taking place at that very moment. She understood better than most people that every encounter carried the possibility of becoming either a misunderstanding or an opportunity to strengthen trust. The difference often depended upon patience, professionalism, and the willingness to let facts arrive before conclusions. Somewhere across the city, Ethan finished his final report for the day with one thought remaining firmly in his mind. Experience could guide judgment, but only humility allowed judgment to improve when the complete truth finally appeared. Several weeks later, the encounter outside the federal building had quietly become another completed case inside official records, but its influence reached far beyond the paperwork stored in secured filing systems. The dispatch recordings, body camera footage, building security video, and written reports all told the same consistent story from different angles. Facts had done what emotions never could. They had preserved the truth exactly as it happened. Inside the Federal Bureau of Investigation office, Special Agent Maya Brooks had already moved on to another assignment. Her desk held new files, new schedules, and new responsibilities waiting to be addressed with the same discipline she had demonstrated throughout her career. She never spoke publicly about the 7 minutes that unexpectedly drew the attention of complete strangers. 4. Her professionalism meant allowing actions to speak long after conversations had ended. One afternoon, a newly assigned federal trainee asked Maya a simple question after reviewing operational procedures. "How do you stay so calm when people misunderstand you?" Maya paused for a moment before answering with the quiet confidence that had defined every important decision she made. Because the truth does not become stronger when you argue for it. It becomes stronger when you protect it until the right moment. The trainee nodded thoughtfully, realizing that patience was not weakness. It was another form of strength. Across the city, Officer Ethan Walker continued serving his community with a different perspective than he had carried before that Tuesday morning. The experience became part of additional professional training inside his department, not because anyone wanted to assign blame, but because every profession grows stronger when real situations become opportunities for improvement. Ethan often found himself taking an extra moment before reaching conclusions, asking one additional question before making assumptions, and listening more carefully than he once had. His uniform had not changed, but the person wearing it had learned something that could never be taught by policy manuals alone. Months later, the receptionist who had quietly watched the encounter happened to pass the same parking lot on her way to work. The morning sunlight reflected across the same glass windows. Delivery trucks followed familiar routes. Employees hurried toward another ordinary day. Standing there for only a brief second, she smiled as she remembered how easily appearances had almost shaped the entire story before facts were allowed to finish it. Life often looked ordinary until one unexpected moment revealed a lesson that stayed with people far longer than headlines ever could. The city continued moving forward exactly as cities always do, filled with strangers crossing paths without knowing the responsibilities, sacrifices, or experiences carried by the people walking beside them. Some wore uniforms. Some carried briefcases. Some displayed badges openly. Others carried authority that remained invisible until duty required it to be revealed. Every one of them deserved to be treated with basic dignity before assumptions entered the conversation. Long after the reports had been archived and the operation had officially concluded, one simple truth continued echoing more powerfully than any courtroom speech or public statement ever could. Respect should never depend on discovering who someone is. Respect should begin before anyone feels the need to explain themselves. And on one quiet Tuesday morning in Atlanta, 7 ordinary minutes reminded everyone watching that real justice does not arrive with the loudest voice. It arrives with patience, integrity, and the courage to let truth speak for itself when the time is finally right.